Welcome to Lore Citizen, a podcast dedicated to all things Star Citizen lore. If you enjoy this, make sure that you like, subscribe, and follow all of our social medias. Without further ado, let's get started. Welcome back to another Lore Citizen podcast. My name is Paul, Berserker01, Batman Shelley, the one of the hosts and facilitators here for this one. Welcome to TheAstroHistorian, and I still haven't done the merch, so I probably should do the merch. But we have a new logo, and it looks sweet, so that'll be on merch soon. So, yay! So it's been a while since we've seen Jale and Al on, but for those people who haven't seen this before, maybe let's start off with Jale. Who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen, and where can they find you?
I'm Jale. I'm a big nerd for alien languages, and at the moment you can mostly find me editing the wiki. If you ever wonder why someone's educational history gets mentioned in a lore article and then suddenly there's a whole page about that university, I'm the little gremlin in the background doing that.
No joke. Every time there's an update to like the Galactopedia, I'm like, Jale, there's an update, and he's just like, yes, yeah, excellent.
Another university to talk about.
Yes, you almost see Jale drool. He's like Homer Simpson when it comes to that.
Fictional higher education, yeah.
Yes. And you're a mixologist. A mixologist of note.
Yes. I'm trying to remember. Oh, yes. I remember that now. All right. And Al, who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen? Where can they find you?
I'm Al, or Al Garrett, known as being one of the info runners. Also the voice of Old Man Al Hurston. Now, Al, you shouldn't be saying that about me. I'm quite a kindly old Hurston. You know that. Yeah, so that's who I am. Player of Star Citizen, occasionally stream, but most often on Info Runners is where I'm at.
Awesome. So the topic today came about. I think we were talking about like the worst companies to work for, because it's often talked about like the worst companies to work for in the verse are, the ArtCorp and Hurston go head to head, much to the chagrin of Old Man Al. I'm sure he thinks there's bias in that list thing.
Now, Paulie, you know that's bias, and people are just having just don't like Hurston, but they always fail to remember that Hurst started off as a laser, selling laser weapons and building defense platforms that helped us defend Earth against and humanity against the Devaran and the Vandal threat. So, thank you.
Thank you, Old Man Al.
Old Man Al. But he is right. He is right. They may have nasty work contracts, but they are responsible for the defense platforms. So. Anyway, sorry.
But but we're gonna think about the opposite side. We were thinking like, what if we were in the verse, what companies would we like to work for? So we all had different ideas. I'll say this right ahead for all you Crusader fans. None of us picked Crusader. They're very obvious as a really good company, but we wanted to kind of highlight some other companies which you may not know about in terms of their general work environment and how they work and such. So with that being said, Al, go ahead and start with what company do you think is the best to work for in the verse?
Kruger Intergalactic are a company any student, whether they've just finished their equivalency or having completed higher education at one of the Empire's universities, should consider for their career. Especially if you manage to land a starting position at the company's headquarters and main manufacturing plants, renowned for their beautiful vistas in the mountains on Cascum, in the Castra system. So why Kruger, I hear you ask? Kruger is one of a handful of companies within the UEE that has survived the test of time, having been founded in 2558 by Ozel Kruger. That's a continuous operation of a company for 395 years. Now, many spacefarers know Kruger Intergalactic as a relatively small company that manufactures ballistic Gatling guns, the most well known is the Size 3 Tiger Strike, which is part of a stock loadout on the Avenger Titan. And they also know that the Kruger Intergalactic make the P-52 Merlin and the P-72 Archimedes, snub or parasite craft, which have developed a reputation as being agile and nimble snub fighters, and more recently have garnered fame as reliable racing ships. The P-52 Archimedes. P-72 Archimedes is currently the most popular ship flown in the AX2 category of the 2953 Crux Cup. The company may also appear to have no idea of the direction they're headed. Is it a ship manufacturer or a weapons manufacturer? And so you might be thinking this is a company that you don't want to work for. It's a company that's destined to fail. But that would be further from the truth. If you have thought that about Kruger Intergalactic, then think again. Kruger Intergalactic have built a reputation for designing and manufacturing, on time and on budget, custom-made precision parts and components of excellent quality. They have lived up to Oswald Kruger's mantra, perfection in every part. Well, let's have a bit of a closer look at Kruger Intergalactic. Since their precision parts and components can be found in a myriad of ships and weapons, believe it or not, every ship you're flying probably has custom Kruger Intergalactic parts making it up. Kruger Intergalactic was originally formed in Borea in the Magnus system. I'm sure that our barkeep is nodding his head and smiling from ear to ear at that news.
Listen. I'm a Magnus boy at heart. I'm never gonna live that down. But they did. I will say they did abandon us. So we'll get to that.
Well, we will cover that. I think there's a bit of skullduggery going on there. So they were developed they were founded during the time when the UPE was the United Planets of Earth were having military contacts, and the Navy was being expanding, and Borea was the naval shipyards, and lots of money was pouring into the system. And Kruger Intergalactic were a small company. They couldn't vie for those lucrative government contracts, but they were in a position to provide precision custom parts for the larger firms. Their reputation with those other companies became they just grew. They were known. If you want custom parts, if you want them on time, if you want them really good, go to Kruger. Don't go anywhere else. Kruger's your boy. And it was during this period that Kruger began working with Bering and RSI. They make everything from Bering's the firing pin for Bering's P8 AR rifle to crucial capital ship components for ships like the RSI, Bengal. Kruger's design parts are essential, so much so that at one board meeting, an unknown executive once said, "We make all the parts for the gun except the gun itself." And this throwaway line changed the way the company looked at themselves. They decided they would make their own gun, and they started with a small weapons line. Sales of the weapon of their Gatling guns were very sluggish to start with, because no one had heard of this new upstart weapons manufacturer. They struck a deal with Aegis to put the Tiger Strike as a standard weapon on the Avenger, and it was only after that point, as the Avenger was being used by advocacy, that the weapon's quality and durability and reliability was appreciated and sales took off. Now, executives took that line of we make all the parts, but not the item, when it came to ships. This time, Kruger leveraged their long-standing relationship with RSI and came to an agreement to provide the snub ship for the Constellation line. This enabled them to stop that sluggish, well, we don't know who you are, you're an upstart company. And as a result of that relationship, the snub P-52, 72 ships have come into a line of their own. They're recognised as strong, reliable parasite craft that are nimble and fast and have good armament, but they've also been recognised as really good racing ships, and the P-72 is now marketed as a racing ship. Now, as our barkeep and astrohistorian have pointed out, even though Kruger did originate and start in Magnus, they did leave. In 2571, after the UE left the Magnus system for Killian, that was a death knell for many of the companies within Magnus. Companies either left or they closed down. They just couldn't afford it. Now, it's interesting because the CEO of Kruger at the time, Arten Shensiri, announced the company would remain in Magnus. In fact, the company seems so keen to remain that they expanded their operations. They bought property. They were able to get cheap property and real estate and manufacturing plants and equipment. That is not the thinking of a company that is intending to leave. The company's reputation was always on being able to provide and supply their parts on time, under cost, and everything else. During their time, the law and order of the Magnus system was collapsing. In 2785, pirates raided shipments from Kruger headed for RSI, and this actually really had an impact on the company's ability to guarantee supply. And so the company started to look for a new place to call home. Now, documents have surfaced in recent years claiming that Shansiri had made an agreement with RSI saying, yes, we will leave the system. Now, Kruger did leave the system and they moved to the Sherman system when that was opened up for civilian settlement after the Navy withdrew from CASCOM. Now, my question is, if Kruger had intended to abandon and leave Magnus, even after their claims that we will always have Kruger parts will always be made in Magnus, and they left because law and order had collapsed in the system when the Navy left, why on earth would they go to another system where the Navy's left? And I actually think it speaks to the company where they were looking at building up, trying to work and build up a community, but conditions just became beyond their control. And I wonder whether those documents claiming that they'd had that previous agreement with RSI to leave are just an endeavour to besmirch their name by another company that has moved into the Magnus system and is seen as a saviour. And I see Paul was coughing there because he finds that such a horrid thing to claim about a favoured company of his, I believe.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, no, I muted myself, so hopefully I didn't get picked up in the recording.
That's the end of Kruger. Why you should work for Kruger, and I just the fact that they make so many parts, the fact that they do make quality weapons and some really good ships. It would be nice to see more, but the fact that there are, if you're working at their head office, you're on CASCOM. CASCOM is known for its mountain vistas.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It's a beautiful place to be. It's almost it's known as a city in the clouds.
Yeah, the island in the clouds or something like that is what it's called. Sherman is, yeah. I was gonna say Sherman is a great place to work, and I think there's one or two other companies that have called home. I want to say Nasdaq, I think, is headquartered in Sherman as well. No, it might be it might be an Area 18. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, there's like one other company I'd have to look up that does it. It's kind of a smaller company. Oh no, it's one of the defense like armor companies. The companies that make like FPS armor. I'll have it up on the screen.
There are a couple of places that do make it home, and they've actually tried to push that idea.
The thing I love about Sherman is it's the place to go for like the best of the Mesa era fascist architecture.
Yes.
Like, it's like, well, they were fascists and stuff, but they did know some good architecture.
Well,
It's like the whole Hugo Boss situation.
Yeah.
well, the other thing that's really nice about CASCOM is the fact that when they were building the base for the Navy, the admiral wanted a defendable place, so they built it into the mountains. So it's actually probably one of the safest places to be.
Yeah, it's got giant cannons too that can go to from surface to orbit. I've joked around that it should be called mess around and find out as the two cannons, because they're still active. They could still fire into orbit and like anti-capital ship lasers.
So if you're concerned about being secure in your job and being safe when you're working there, if you're working in Kruger on CASCOM, you are safe. It's a beautiful place to be. The city itself actually is pushing for the island and the lovely pastime existence. But the fact that Kruger is also an old company, the fact that they've existed, that got that longevity, means your employment is secured. You've got a fairly secure company when you're working for them, and they make pretty much everything. And have proved that they make everything. And how do we know we make everything? We've made this weapon line and we've made these ships. So yeah, there's Kruger.
I like Kruger in general. They've got a really interesting history, and they're because they're just kind of a parts manufacturer. They're one of those companies where if you wanted to make anything, if you wanted to be in any part of that process, you want to make ships, you want to make parts for guns, for power plants, for whatever, they make it. So they're so ubiquitous everywhere. So
yeah, and if you came to them and said, "Oh, look, we need a new part we need a new trigger for this weapon," they would design and manufacture that part for you.
Mhm.
So that they're not just making, "Oh, give us your blueprint, we'll make your part." They actually design the part, make the part, ship the part, and they're renowned for doing it on time, under budget.
Yeah.
And with high quality. So
Yeah. Jale, your company.
Yeah, I'm gonna tout the maybe lesser known advantages of a much better known company. Because if I was like going around the jobs fair in the verse, I would be gravitating towards MISC. So MISC is, I guess I can frame it in juxtaposition to Kruger. They're a much younger company. They're 148 years old, which in the UE timescale is not very long. They were founded in the very early days of the democratic UEE after the fall of the messes, much like Crusader. So one of these kind of fresher new kids on the block, only 148 years old. And the companies that came together to form this had been around for longer, and it was a merger between basically just a design house that was called Musashi, and then this failing giant electronics manufacturer called Hatto Electronics Corporation. So you had a group of people who had really great ideas, but then nowhere to make them, and a group of people who were really great at making stuff, but were all out of ideas. So it was kind of a very much a match made in heaven there, and that's where you get this Musashi Industrial Starflight concern growing out of. So they set themselves up to produce these well-designed, high-quality ships, but at industrial quantities and with these really exacting engineering standards. So one of the perks of working at a MISC factory is you are probably going to be working with some pretty cutting-edge technology and processes. MISCs boast that they have these really highly modular and ergonomic factories, and they can be producing one kind of ship and then overnight change to producing a completely different model of their ships. That's partly down to how their factories are set up, is partly down to how their ships are set up, with modularity and transferability being like an element of their design. Their design processes are also really rigorously empirical. So the Starfarer, one of the two really major civilian market ships that they focused on in recent years, came about as a result of MISC setting up an analysis board, conducting an 18-month survey, and producing a 15,000 page study on ship roles and shortcomings faced by space pilots to find the niches that were not covered by the existing offerings. And what they found was a niche shaped like a starfarer. So this implies that working at MISC means that the top tech and the top ideas are highly valued. Then you can consider the location. Yeah, Cascom's lovely and stuff, but do you really want to be chasing the old Navy bases all around the verse? MISC is set up in Fujin City in Saisei, which is in the Centauri system. So this is one of the most beautiful cities in the verse. It's their primary factories on the city outskirts, and their HQ is more in the city center. But this is a place that is known for its natural beauty, and the city is known for its beautiful architecture. But unlike many other cities, this beauty is intertwined with the high-tech industry. So it's not just there to serve the managerial and executive classes. Nessa Park in the city centre is specifically built for the recreation of workers, and suggests that they value the well-being of their employees. They also have factories all across the empire, but they're all built to completely identical standards, meaning that if you transfer to another factory, you are dropping straight in. Like, you have some skills that are transferable across the verse within the same company, and you wouldn't be retraining on like a completely different set of tools, different set of things. It's like McDonald's. It's just the same each time. So all of these perks are before you even consider one of the other standout unusual aspects about MISC, which is the historical Xi'an connection. They were the first major human company to collaborate with a Xi'an company, which has provided them access to advanced alien technology. And as an employee, perhaps the opportunity to visit the South Shan on the company dime, expenses paid. But I think what really draws me to MISC in the idea of as an employee is their values. They make these rugged and industrial craft, and for most of their history, they were a purely industrial manufacturer. They still have this heavy industrial division, but in recent years have moved towards pushing these more civilian marketed craft, the Freelancer and the Starfarer being like their biggest sellers. But even though these are all quite practical things, they focus on making them beautiful in at least a way that I find beautiful. They have these airstream-like curves, but they don't turn beauty into this kind of hollow concept of luxury where they just put on the wood paneling and put a zero on the price. So they make some of the most popular and ubiquitous craft in the verse, like the Hull Sea, but aren't afraid to make something really niche and daring when they see an opportunity, like the Starfarer's original concept, which was originally defined as a niche in this big study. Exotic variants of the Freelancer. There's more beyond what we see in terms of the playable ones. Or the MISC Razor racing ship. That's a very kind of strange niche for an industrial company to pursue. So they seem to seek improvement rather than searching for the lowest common denominator. And I think that's something I would value in a workplace. So that's why MISC, although it is an obvious one on the top of those lists of like solid employers, things that are well known, things that are businesses which are going to be healthy, I think there's a lot of perks to it that are maybe not so widely known. So that's my answer to that question.
Yeah, the MISC is if you like studies, if you like doing research and data, they are very much a research and data place. Like, everything is all about research and data. You point out the Starfarer. I believe the same thing happened with the Razor. Was it was like we want to be able to win. We want to do something other than let's break out of the mold. And so they did a really intensive study, and it just failed. But then after they had this agreement with the Xi'an, they managed to get technology, and like, wait, now we have the technology to do this. So, and as you said, Fujin City is beautiful. It's quite intentionally beautiful. It was handcrafted to be beautiful. They even have a like a limit on who can live on the planet. And since MISC is probably one of the biggest companies in Fujin City, they probably are the ones who would determine you'd probably be the only way you could live in Fujin cities if you work for MISC. So
it is a small downside of living in in Saisei is that it's the one planet that's got, or what we know has population controls and a single child policy, which is a weird thing to put in, but there we go.
Yeah.
Governor's Council decided that one.
Yeah. But like everything's
I
built in
think
harmony with nature. It's all built as a lot of people. I remember if they said something about like oxygen level, like it's got a slightly high oxygen level. So yeah, sorry, I know a lot about Virgin City.
No,
so
that's fine. Yeah, no, it's I think it should be a selling point considering myth because you don't want your the place where your HQ is, particularly if it's named after you, to be a dystopian hellscape of dust storms and radioactive waste. Right, Al?
Well, I would agree, but you don't necessarily want your hometown to be one that's filled with smog and pollution. Unfortunately, I do think that comes with part of a process that Hurston have with being a manufacturer of processing antimatter, which is used in both quantum fuel and antimatter, and the stuff that's used in antimatter weapons and in quantum fuel. And that is has quite nasty byproducts. It isn't good for your workers, and there are only two places I know of that actually refine that material.
It's that in a prison, isn't it?
One is Hurston Dynamics, and the other one is Quarterdeck.
Quarterdeck. Well,
which is not a nice place to be. So you can understand why people don't like Hurston.
Living in Hurston. Well, it also doesn't help that they test those weapons on their planet constantly.
No. Well,
I mean, where'd all those trash biomes come from? Was that all just Hurston City, or are they just like trash dumping?
Trash dumping, and they are almost they don't really look after their environment.
I don't think it's just Lawville. I think I always thought that
planet.
it's probably they're probably like importing garbage from Arcot for money.
They are quite happy to, I imagine, be the garbage dump for the system. That would be my impression. They don't.
Wouldn't happen on Saisei. Would not.
No. Well, unfortunately, some of the executives in Hurston don't value the point that Hurston could be the breadbasket of Stanton.
Unlike Old Man Al and his Evercrack farms with Uber girls. So
that's right. So Old Man Al has a vision.
Yes, of a ranch.
He sees the longevity. He sees the longevity of that Hurston could be, but I think the moons of Hurston are more likely to be the places where they keep bombing and doing stuff. And but we do know that the atmosphere on Hurston itself is not the best, and they do the minimum in terms of looking at the well-being of the workers. So you get cheap masks and oxygen stuff. So yeah, Hurston for the entry-level worker is not the place you want to go.
No.
If you're an executive or someone who can get into the
upper echelon,
I suppose the tower, live in the tower, then you're certainly better off. You've probably got better air conditioning and air filtering systems and the rest of it. But yeah, it's certainly not a choice you'd pick for someone having finished their equivalency or fresh out of uni and going to start off.
Speaking of which, that's actually a good transition because we're going to talk about another company in Stanton. I'm going to, at least, which a lot of people don't know is actually headquartered in Stanton, which is Shubin Interstellar. Now that's my company that I'm choosing. Now, the reason why I'm choosing it is for many reasons. Number one, Shubin Interstellar is one of the oldest companies in the verse. It was founded in 2410 by a woman named Martha Shubin, who was a real estate magnate in the Sol system. And right when all this big boom of terraformation and exploration was going on, she invested heavily in terraformation, and almost by accident ended up with 60% of all mining and terraformation contracts in the UEE, in the UNE at the time. In fact, let me look up the actual guy's name. Economic historian Edward Norgan called Shubin Interstellar the Hidden Empire in a book that's with the same name, talking about how influential they were. They've become so influential that there is a term called if a senator has rocks in their pocket, it means that they're paid off by Shubin Interstellar. Now, that may sound like this big evil conglomerate and organization, but in reality, they control and owns a lot of the UEE. So if you wanted to work for them, you wanted to do just about anything in the UEE, working for Shubin is a great way of doing it. They own, for instance, AeroView Hangars, the hangar company. They control that. They work with multiple contractors. So if you're just getting started and you wanted to go contracting, Shubin does plenty of contracting work all throughout its corporate expanse. We also know that they have this thing called the Shu Gen program, which is gives you free imprints for regen. So all employees get free regen on the company dime of Shubin. So there are some great advantages for that. They also, because we've been seeing their what is it? Their company newsletter called Mining Rocks. They have trivia teams that compete against each other across the entire company that they have annual stuff for. They do scholarships for students to get involved in all sorts of ways, and yeah, they're a pretty okay okay company. And because they're all over the verse, if you wanted to travel, Shubin's a great company to work for. They have their kind of locations everywhere, from dangerous places to beautiful places, and their headquarters is in Microtech. So if you wanted a desk job at Shubin, working in Microtech is a pretty nice place to work. It's a little cold, but look at all of the yoga classes you could go to, climbing wall climbs. They got a great bar scene. It's a nice place. We've already been there. We know what it looks like. So, now there are some controversies with it because they're so big and because they're so influential. There is some concern that they may be having too much power and influence, but if you're working for them, that's a good thing. It means you have more of an options to do other things. So, but yeah, that's Shubin. That's why I think y'all should consider Shubin Interstellar.
I've got to say, Paul, the claim that they have their healthcare system and give you free imprints, that is a standard thing that Hurston do.
Yeah, but they don't make you sign lifetime contracts at
Shubin. Every worker at Hurston has accommodation and free healthcare.
Yeah, the problem is that the accommodation is on Hurston.
Well, it depends. Depends, you know. It depends.
I mean, I know that it makes the commute short, but still.
But they do have a state-of-the-art hospital on Hurston, so you know that they do there are stuff. But yes, yeah, any company worth its salt is going to be or should be doing those types of things. So the thing that gets me with Shubin though is we know they've got this massive mining platform.
Mm-hmm.
And it dwarfs the Orion, and the Orion is a mining platform and factory, and the Shubin version dwarfs it. Like
yeah, it's probably about the same size as Ruin Station is in terms of its just sheer sky size. It's a floating fly. It's not barely. I would call it a flying city, but it's closer to like a flying metropolis, like a megalopolis. It's just so big.
I think on one of the cutscenes we had of Squadron 42, you had the Idris flying past it, and the Idris is the Idris is like an Aurora flying past, you know, Everest Station or something like that.
To this station,
It's minuscule in comparison to this mining platform that they have. So,
and they may have multiple of those mining platforms. So, like, we were talking about a company that has effectively a floating city with all of the accoutrement, like stores and habitation, you know, nightlife, recreation. So it's not a bad company to work for. On top of work, using technologies from being able to use something like a mining tick if you wanted to, and using lots of automated remote operated facilities and such. So, but I think we're gonna wrap that up here. And as always, let us know your thoughts on any companies. Maybe a company that you wanna talk about and pitch for best company in the verse. Let us know your thoughts on these. Make sure you're following Jale on his social medias and youtube.com/@Jale, right?
Yeah, I think something like that.
Yeah. And of course, Al, you can join here or youtube.com/TheInfoRunners. I will be back soon-ish. We'll have to kind of negotiate when this happens, but I'm going to try to get as many people as possible, start dragging other folks in who do lore content or interested in lore content. So that'll be coming out soon. Try to keep this more variety and keep it going at least once a month, if not more. So, and like I say every time, I was going to do the AstroPub intro. And remember, Ex Historia ad Astra.